This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kan du norsk?
If you used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based techniques teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/Spotify, spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Long before a socialist named Zohran Mamdani trounced former governor Andrew Cuomo to become New York City's Democratic nominee for mayor, long before anyone knew Mamdani was going to run at all, journalist Ross Barkan, he knew. Ross knew because Zohran Mamdani was calling him.
He thought he could be viable. I don't think either of us thought he would necessarily shoot to the top and win. I mean, not thinking about that necessarily at the beginning, but there was an opening there. He understood it. I understood it. I thought it was a good, decent idea. I said, you've nothing to lose, but there's a lot to gain if we do well.
By now, you've probably heard that Zohran Mamdani did do well. Very well. Well enough that while most politicos were not expecting to know who the Democratic nominee for mayor would be until July, Andrew Cuomo was giving a concession speech by 10:30 Tuesday night. And then it was Mamdani's turn.
Tonight, we made history.
Mamdani's victory appears to have been built on a constituency of first-time voters. He got them to the polls by promising a New York we can afford. And if he wins in November, Mamdani will be the first Muslim, first South Asian, and first Democratic Socialist leader of the biggest city in America.
In the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it is done. My friends, we have done it.
I wasn't surprised he became a competitive mayoral candidate. I was surprised he won by so much. I'm not sure anyone saw that coming. I haven't talked to him about it, but I'm not sure he saw it coming to such an astounding degree.
At this point, you may be asking yourself, how does Ross Barkan know Zohran Mamdani like this? And there's a bit of a story here. See, Ross ran for office himself a few years back, New York State Assembly, and he convinced a young Zohran Mamdani to help him do it. Mamdani was Ross's field director and eventually his campaign manager. Ross says Mamdani had this uncanny ability to get people to do boring, necessary stuff, like knock on doors. You've told a couple of stories about him that really stuck with me. One was a story of this, table tennis game you played where you went in and you're like, oh, I'm going to win. And then you, just kicked your butt.
Yeah, it was close. They were tight games, but he was better.
You tell it as, a parable of, don't be too cocky with this guy because he's talented and you may not know it until you're already in the game with him.
Oh, definitely. Yes, no, absolutely. He can outwork you, and he has abilities that most politicians do not have, like an Obama or someone like that, where they are blessed. If you told me in 2018 he would be running competitively for mayor one day, I would totally believe that. If you told me by 2025 he'd be the Democratic nominee defeating Andrew Cuomo, I don't know, would have sounded a bit like fan fiction.
This morning, after it was completely clear Zohran had won, you wrote an article arguing that he is already one of the most prominent leftist politicians in America, joining the pantheon of AOC and Bernie Sanders. But you also point out that neither of those people ever won a race like this one. What do you mean by that?
The way he won and the multiracial working class and middle class coalition that he assembled was on a scale that no one on the socialist or maybe even progressive left has ever done. It's easy to lose track of the fact that until Zohran, leftists were not often competing for executive offices, and they were confining themselves to very particular districts. You take it all together, what he has done already is of a scale that few, if any, in politics today have come close to doing.
Today on the show, an insider explains how Zohran Mamdani did it. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, just hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill, too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
This episode is brought to you by Avid Reader Press. Legendary investor Ray Dalio's new book, How Countries Go Broke: The Big Cycle, explains the mechanics behind big debt crises. Larry Summers says Dalio's brilliant iconoclastic approach is an invaluable resource, and Hank Paulson says it provides a solution to what is the biggest and most certain threat to our prosperity. Read it to understand the greatest economic issue of our time. Available now wherever books are sold.
Before we get started, a little Zohran Mamdani 101. Mamdani was born in Kampala, Uganda, to Indian parents. He moved to New York when he was 7, eventually becoming a U.S. citizen. He's just 33 years old. Mamdani got his start in politics, working on a number of campaigns for city council, state assembly. On the side, he put out a few rap songs under the name Young Cardamom.
Bring the flavor to the fish, bring the flavor to the rice. Who's the number one spice? Who's the number one spice? Bring the flavor to the fish, bring the flavor to the rice.
The video for this song was directed by his mother, filmmaker Mira Nair. She used it in her movie Queen of Katwe.
It's in the morning, I roll like a dice. Mama told me this once and I'm telling you twice.
Anyway, back to politics. It was 2020 when Mamdani decided to run for office himself. He became a state assembly member, representing Queens. And then last year, he announced his run for mayor. His platform was appealingly simple. Make the city more affordable, with free buses, city-run grocery stores, and a rent freeze on rent-stabilized apartments. At first, he was polling close to zero. But Ross says that just didn't deter him.
Someone like Zohran, what makes him so potent is he's not naive and he is savvy and he cares about winning. Zohran was never interested in vanity campaigns and protest campaigns. He wanted to be competitive and he wanted to win. Even when the campaigns didn't win because he wouldn't compromise his values, he still wanted to win. So my state Senate campaign, we discussed path to victory. We discussed fundraising. He wanted to know where I was going to be. He wanted to know how I was conceiving of the race. He wanted to decide how he was going to spend his time. I had to convince him this is a good way to spend your time, spend your year, basically. I mean, campaigns are extremely intensive. They take months and months and months. If you're doing them correctly, they are 24/7 affairs. They don't stop until election day. And that's how he always was. So it was funny during the campaign when people would say he's unserious or he's foolish in some way because he's so charismatic, but there's no substance there. To me, having known him, I knew that not to be true. I mean, we're putting politics aside. You can think his politics are very off base. You cannot agree with him on Israel. You can believe that rent stabilized apartments shouldn't have their rent frozen, but you can't deny, for me at least, his seriousness, because you don't run a campaign like this unless you are a highly competent and serious person. I mean, campaigns are like businesses, and a mayoral campaign is a very big business. And if you compare and contrast Cuomo versus Mamdani and look at how they ran their respective campaigns, one gets an A plus and one gets an F minus.
Yeah, compare them for me.
The very best and the very worst campaigns I've ever seen in one race.
Wow. I mean, I think as a voter, Cuomo came off as like he felt like he deserved this role. And he didn't do a whole lot of like active campaigning himself. Like you can just compare Mamdani the weekend before the election. He literally walked the length of Manhattan and was like saying hello to people, introducing himself, filming it the whole time because he was quite good with social media.
We have just begun our walk through the entirety of Manhattan. We're at Inwood Hill Park at the tip top. We're outside because New Yorkers deserve a mayor that they can see, they can hear, they can even yell at. Good, bro. Election's on Tuesday.
Yeah?
You could never imagine Cuomo doing something like that.
Never. And Cuomo hardly campaigned at all. Very few public events, very few media questions, extremely entitled, extremely lazy. The messaging didn't ring true. Crime in the city, violent crime in particular, is falling. We talk about the city like it was out of control.
And yet the Democratic establishment seemed to sort of line up behind him.
Yes.
I mean, you had people who were really his enemies lining up to say like, well, I guess this is where we are. You can talk about some organized labor did that. You can talk about people like the governor, Kathy Hochul, and Senators Chuck Schumer, Kirsten Gillibrand being, silent, just sort of like not speaking against him. And that was meaningful.
No one spoke against him. He walked right into it. And some of that was the fact that there wasn't an obvious strong alternative to them. Zohran was the strong alternative, but when they looked at the field, they would go, well, Cuomo's going to win anyway. He's highly vindictive and he's hard to deal with. So let's get on his good side now. Let's fold in. It's the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And then as Zohran rose, there was consternation that, a young, unpredictable socialist state assemblyman being mayor would mean a very, for them, an unstable environment, just in terms of they wouldn't know quite what to expect.
And the knock against Zohran was that he was a young state assemblyman. There were stories about he didn't show up for votes. And that was a big deal. People didn't like that he was associated with the Democratic Socialists. People didn't like that he'd been speaking about Palestine for a very long time. People didn't like his proposals. They said the idea of freezing the rent might actually do more harm than good because he has this proposal to freeze rent-controlled rent. So there was just a lot of like boom, 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 one thing after another. And you could see it all laid out. The New York Times wrote this like non-endorsement that ended up being a sort of soft endorsement of Andrew Cuomo by basically saying like Zohran Mamdani is just too inexperienced and his proposals are too wild.
Yes. And the experience factor was something that institutional players, whether it's media or labor or the political class, really held against him.
As someone who's been a candidate before, why? Why is there this incuriousness?
Politics is a very wait your turn industry. It's not an imaginative place to be. It's hard to be an ambitious, creative person and move in the political world. And Zohran was cutting the line tremendously. How dare he? Almost governor for nearly 11 years. Look at all the things he did. And I think they forgot a few things. One, there's experience. There's also bad experience. Look at all the scandals of the Cuomo administration. Look at all the failures. And then also, a lot of the same attacks leveled at Zohran were leveled at another very successful politician with African roots and a foreign name. And his name is Barack Obama. And as this race wore on, that was a parallel that came to me more and more, which is here is the young, charismatic, handsome politician surging from the bottom to the top. Here's the entitled, dynastic front runner. You go from a Clinton to a Cuomo. Of course, Bill endorsed Andrew Cuomo in this mayoral race. And you remember some of the attacks that Hillary Clinton leveled on Obama, and they weren't so different than the attacks Cuomo was leveling on Mamdani. Who are you? What have you done?
Yeah. The other thing that I think it's important for us to talk about as we talk about this race and why it played out the way it did is the fact that New York City mayoral primaries have ranked choice voting, which basically means you pick a menu of options. And to me, I looked at this and it seemed like it was uniquely suited to what happened with Mamdani. And I say that because for two reasons. First of all, there was one candidate in this race, Andrew Cuomo, who all the other candidates wanted to eliminate. So it gives them an incentive to work together, which ranked choice voting is supposed to do anyway. But they really had it here. Second of all, I think of Zohran Mamdani as a really positive candidate, someone who is, if I picture him smiling. You know, if I picture Donald Trump, I picture him kind of grimacing. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's like that cooperative magnetic energy is good for like cross endorsement, essentially. And he really delivered on that. Like he made a bunch of appearances with another candidate, Brad Lander, where they both talked about how great the other one was.
Zohran, you've done a remarkable job building a historic grassroots campaign for a New York City all New Yorkers can afford.
Brad, you've been a principled progressive leader in our city for years.
Early voting starts tomorrow, and we both know what we need to do to save our city from Andrew Cuomo. You want to tell him?
You go first.
Nah, you go first.
Let's do it together. We're cross-endorsing.
In New York City,
which is like, when was the last time you saw politicians do that, who are competing against each other?
Definitely. He was very well positioned to do that. He's a naturally friendly person. You rarely see him angry. I think the only times I saw him angry actually were in debates with Andrew Cuomo. Voters in general want the happy warrior again. You know, we're in a very chaotic era. There's a lot of anger and rage and sadness and certainly the rhetoric that's out there. You go from Trump and you look at the way politicians talk about each election as the end of this, the end of that. I'd say both Democrats and Republicans get very apocalyptic. And Zohran was not that way. It was a very hopeful message. And because he was very hopeful, upbeat, funny, it made it easier for him to partner with others. So he cross-endorsed the Brad Lander. He wanted to cross-endorse the Adrienne Adams. He actually put out a fundraising video for her, helped her a lot. It was her loss, not his, when she decided she did not want to cross-endorse with him. And in fact, a lot of these other candidates made a huge mistake in not teaming up with Zohran because they got very few votes. I mean, they were left in the dust. You look at this primary, it was Zohran, it was Cuomo, and it's Lander kind of in a respectable but distant third, and the rest of the candidates got hardly any votes at all.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about the ranked choice voting election is it actually didn't matter all that much in the end for all the talk of strategy and cross-endorsing because Zohran won by so much that if you ran this under the old system, the old primary system,
he still would have won.
Yes, he would have in the old system because he broke 40%. He would have won without a runoff like Bill de Blasio did in 2013.
But this is a primary, which means in November, it's going to be a much more contentious race. It's not ranked choice.
No, it's plurality.
Do you worry at all that like that kind of election is not suited to Zohran's strengths?
I am less concerned about Zohran today than I would have been before the polls closed. When I was thinking about the race a day ago, my thought was this will be a very close election. Zohran could win, but by a little bit. Cuomo could be emboldened, get another super PAC together, try to run run the same, play the same movie again, but with a little more funding, and it would be a tough race. He'd win it, I think, as the Democratic nominee, but it'd be tough, it'd be bloody. Now, because he was so dominant, I think the wind is sucked out of Cuomo's sails. I think if Cuomo even thinks about running again, he's going to find very little support. I think Eric Adams is going to position himself as the candidate of the anti-Zohran vote. He's going to go to all the real estate developers, the Wall Street financiers, ask for money, tell them to fund a super PAC, do the whole 9 yards.
And they're going to have to decide, is this our guy? Because he's incredibly tarnished.
He is deeply tarnished. He's widely unpopular. He has really almost no path to victory. Zohran is now will have the Democratic line. He's going to have a lot of money. He's going to get the lion's share of organized labor support. They're really going to consolidate around him now as the nominee. And you're seeing the statements today are very telling. Kathy Hochul and Chuck Schumer put out very positive, praiseworthy statements to Zohran.
Hakeem Jeffries' statement was a little more chill to my eyes.
Yes, but he hates DSA.
Democratic Socialists.
Yes, he hates what they stand for. They've talked about primarying him before, so he himself does not want Zohran, but he's smart enough to understand this was a stunning rebuke of Cuomo and the Democratic establishment. And I think Zohran will have a real juggernaut in the general election, and he will very likely defeat Eric Adams and the Republican Siwa. A day ago, I thought this would be very competitive and topsy-turvy general election. I no longer think that. I think Zohran, if he runs the campaign that he ran in the primary, he is going to be the next mayor of New York City.
We'll be right back after a quick break. This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's smart to always have a few financial goals, and here's a really smart one you can set: earning cash back on what you buy every day. With Discover, you can. Get this. Discover automatically matches all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year. Seriously, all of it. Discover trusts you to make smart decisions. After all, you listen to this podcast. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
You know that one friend who somehow knows everything about money? Yeah, now imagine they live in your phone. Say hey to Experian, your big financial friend. It's the app that helps you check your FICO score, find ways to save, and basically feel like a financial genius. And guess what? It's totally free. So go on, download the Experian app. Trust me, having a BFF like this is a total game changer.
If Mamdani does become mayor, which I know you're very bullish on, I'm curious how you think he squares his history as a Democratic Socialist with running the largest city in the country, which is filled with capitalists. Like, he made so many promises on the campaign trail to make city buses free, to open city-run grocery stores, to provide childcare. I don't know that it's possible to deliver on all these promises. And it almost never is possible to deliver on all your promises as a politician.
Right. Very, very few politicians can deliver on everything.
Yes. But I feel like he will be watched. He will be watched and he will be judged because he is the first and because his success is so new.
Yes, he will get a lot of scrutiny. Some are more achievable than others. Some are low-hanging fruit. Rent freeze, rent stabilized apartments, easy to do. De Blasio did it. Mayor appoints the Rent Guidelines Board. Check that off the box. City-run grocery stores, ambitious, but not that ambitious. Open up 5 of them, 1 per borough, fund them with some city money, get a contractor, partner with a supermarket maybe. There are many ways to do it. You can subsidize it and keep the prices low. Not hard. free buses, you're going to have to need help from the MTA. The MTA might not want to do it. Hochul may say no. That could be a fight. So it's doable. It's a matter of, is there political will on the side of the state to fund it?
Yeah, and whether Hochul wants to play with him.
Yes, and she's going to be of two minds. I think on one hand, she's to run for re-election next year, and she wants to appeal to moderates and do well in the suburbs. On the other hand, she almost lost in 2022, and the reason she didn't lose is because the New York City turnout was very high. So she will look to Zohran too. It's not all stay away from the Muslim socialist mayor. It's also, this is a guy with a big fan base.
She needs the city. She's from upstate.
She's from Buffalo, and she needs the city, and he has a real fan base. He's the first local politician of the fan base ever. I mean, AOC, she's a member of Congress, but really a municipal politician never happened. So he's got cards to play. So a lot of what he wants to do is challenging. He's gonna find a lot of hostility. There's going to be an entrenched power elite that wants to defeat him. The police unions could despise him. Got to deal with the education department, so many interest groups, so much to oversee. But I think Zohran can go a long way doing good government. If he is sitting there in year two and there's no scandals, and he's got very good commissioners and very bright people around him, young and old, and there's a sense that the city is open for good business and is a exciting and interesting place, and government is efficient, that can go a long way. So that's how I see it. It's a very exciting time. Even if I didn't know him, I would be excited because this is a sea change. We need a lot of new energy in politics. The Democratic establishment in general was so self-satisfied and could always find excuses for their failures. Certainly after 2016, they found many excuses. And then I'm tired of it. A lot of voters are tired of it. And this is one of those elections where you're out of excuses. This is all laid bare. This is what a massive electorate said about you and your party and your apparatchiks and your heroes like Bill Clinton and Jim Clyburn. They said, get lost. And that's life. That's politics. And here we are. It's a new day, new city.
One of the interesting things that I think the Democrats will need to grapple with when it comes to this election is the fact that the Democrats at large have been saying, they need to give people an affirmative vision for who they are and what they do. And they like to talk about kitchen table issues. We need to talk about healthcare and affordability and all those sorts of things. And the funny thing is that that's exactly what Zohran did. Like, his tagline was a New York City we can afford. He ran with this socialist background, and it freaked a lot of people out. But he actually proved the point that if Democrats focus like a laser on their constituents and what they actually are saying they need addressed, they might find success.
Oh, absolutely. And this is a point I think that can bring a lot of the factions of the party together. Zohran didn't run on these cultural issues that he's being tarred with. Now you can find all his old tweets, and he certainly supported defunding the police. He certainly supports BDS still. He used to identify as an anti-Zionist. I don't know if he still does, but this wasn't his campaign. This was not a Palestine liberation campaign. He didn't go out to bodegas and go to street corners and start talking about defund and all these major 2020 issues. He talked about grocery prices. He talked about rent. He talked about transit. This was an economics campaign. This was a kitchen table campaign. This is the type of campaign you tell a so-called moderate Democrat in a Republican-held district to run on. And that was the Zohran Mamdani campaign. So the lesson is have a message, have an affirmative message, have an argument for why you, have a vision. It's not complicated. What's strange to me is this was the Obama playbook, and for some reason, Democrats decided to tear it up and throw it out. Voters are sick of all that. They want messages, they want arguments, they want to know how you're going to help them make their lives better, and they want energy and they want hope. They want a vision, right? People want to look towards something.
Ross, I'm really grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Ross Barkan is a contributing writer at the New York Times Magazine, a New York Magazine columnist, and the editor-in-chief of The Metropolitan Review. And that's the show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Madeline Ducharme, Ethan Oberman, and Anna Phillips. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.